Welcome, viewers and listeners, to the Total Football Analysis EPL podcast. We are the Thinking Fans podcast. Each week, we get together with our besties who are current pro players, real coaches, academics, and stat heads. In the end, we want to leave you with 3 or 4 cool, thoughtful bits about football. Today, I'm joined by Coach David Seymour, who works on scouting reports in the day and trains starlets in the early evening. I'm joined by Harshal Patel, the architect of dreams coming true. Finally, I'm joined by Sam Brotherton, a professional center back who is known as the cleaner, aka La Femme Nikita, as he tidies up after the team's messes on the pitch. He's a Kiwi who's plied his trade in Madison, Wisconsin, Sunderland, and now North Carolina FC. I am the host, Chris Mumford, known as the Professor. Bella ciao. In our Cool to Know, we take on an alternative view on the Pogba-Fernandes combination, which will likely power the ManU engine room. Can they play nice in the midfield sandbox? We review the most unfortunate transfers this season. Show me the money. Finally, we look at the strength of schedule. We look at our crystal ball, spreadsheet, and prognosticate on the run-in. You want the truth? You can't handle the truth, the philosopher Jack Nicholson said. In our PreCog segment, we review the games of interest. Yes, we are actually previewing games instead of previews of previews. The season starts next week. Oh my. Harshal, can you kick us off with the ManU midfield debate?
Sure, Chris. I think United fans have been looking forward to watching Pogba and Fernandes play together ever since Fernandes joined the club in January, and he's done supremely well since he's joined. But obviously Pogba's been injured and they've not got a chance to play together. But it looks like that sort of combination will be on the field from this week onwards once games start. And while it's going to be, I think it's going to work out really well because they're both, spectacular players and they have immense creative abilities and they can create goals for their teammates out of nowhere. I think there will still need to be a sort of a set tactical system that will have to be put in place for the two of them to thrive together. In my opinion, at least, I think Solskjaer should play a midfield diamond when he wants to play both of them together. And keep in mind that this may not be the case throughout the 10 games or so that United have left in the season because everybody's coming back after a 3-month layoff and they won't be up to match fitness. So we can expect to see some rotation. But in the games that they do start together for Fernandes and Pogba, I think United should play with the diamond because that will give, so you can have Fernandes at the tip of the diamond, you can have Pogba on the left as the left-sided sort of shuttler. And then you have 2 additional players in midfield to cover up defensively and also to provide the passes to Pogba and Fernandes in the sort of dangerous areas that they like to get into. So playing that will then allow Solskjaer to have McTominay and Fred or McTominay and Matic or basically 2 out of those 3 players in the midfield as well, which will allow there to be defensive stability and will allow Pogba and Fernandes to go out and do their thing on the pitch freely. Not saying that it won't work in other systems, but I think if this system is the best one if you want the 2 of them to perform at their best level and not really have to carry the defensive burden.
Sam, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think they're 2 really good players. Obviously, for United fans, the prospect of them playing together is exciting. Tactically, it's difficult to see how he's going to fit them in to a midfield, especially when players like McTominay and Fred have had such good seasons as well and deserve to be in the lineup. But I think they'll figure it out. I think they're good players. I think Pogba especially has some flexibility with the athleticism, kind of where he can play as a 6 and 8 or even a 10. I just think it's interesting to see how long it kind of takes them to figure it out. Obviously, they've got to form those combinations, and it's going to take some time, maybe a couple months. So it'll be interesting kind of to see if they can use this like little bonus part of the kind of end of the part of the season to figure things out and then really form a partnership going into next season.
Well, it'll be interesting as that partnership could make or break their Champions League hopes there. David, let's switch our attention. Can you talk to us about the sporting directors who wish they could do do-overs in the transfers? What were the biggest busts and why?
Yeah, well, I mean, I initially wanted to just talk about Seb Haller, who's at West Ham, and how that one's not quite worked out. And I looked at sort of the premises of players that were earning 100k per week. And yes, Sebastian Haller is one who struggled this season. And I think it's fair to say Andre Gomez hasn't performed as Everton perhaps would have liked him to either. So I think those two, if we're looking at players that were earning the big bucks, as it were. But one other one that I was surprised about was Christian Pulisic earning 145k a week, which makes him the third highest earner at Chelsea, which is big money. But I mean, I'll let you comment on that one, Chris. But I was inspired by looking at these players and thinking, perhaps who could have done better this season after big transfers. And I looked at the players all earning over 100k in the Premier League, and sort of made a starting 11 as such and these aren't players that were signed this season, but these are just still players that you would suggest haven't been on great contracts. And I think when we talk about clubs needing to be more sensible with their transfers, needing to use more thorough scouting processes than just talking to agents, for example, I think this is, obvious why. So if you're not watching the video, if you're just listening, we've got Kepa in goal, who's on around 150k a week, and Arsenal doing both fullbacks. I know Sokratis is actually a centre back, but he has played a right back this season. I couldn't actually find a right back earning over 100k, although Zabaleta is definitely worth a mention on 75k a week. But Arsenal have got a crazy wage bill, rumoured to be around £100 million. And they've got players such as Mesut Ozil on 350k a week. Mustafi is on, I think, 90k. And the two I went with were, Kolasinac at left back and Sokratis at right back, which I don't think either are necessarily players to be building around for Arsenal by any means. And I think Kolasinac is probably down to him being brought in as a free transfer. And then at centre-back, you've got Dejan Lovren and Sakho, who's at Palace. And Palace are a bit of a repeat offender in this list as well, because in midfield, I put Maximilian Meyer as well, who is earning a lot of money. And I think he's played 13 times this season, but no goals, no assists. Hardly worth the money they're paying. Danny Drinkwater as well was another one who's brought in by Burnley on loan, and Burnley did a deal where they were paying, I think, 50k of his 110k a week deal. And I saw a report that said that they actually spent £1 million, I think, for 149 minutes of football from Drinkwater. And we all know the issues that he's had off the pitch. We mentioned Sebastian Haller. I think I've also mentioned Zabaleta. Felipe Anderson's had a disappointing season. He's earning just under six figures, but still, that one hasn't, I don't think, quite panned out as West Ham had hoped, and particularly after a promising first season. But nevertheless, Jack Wilshere and Andrei Yarmolenko are two players that are earning big money. And I would say, Wilshere, we know he's talented, but he can't stay fit. And of course, Yarmolenko, the times that I've seen Yarmolenko play, I've just been so disappointed in him. I think technically he's good, but he doesn't have a lot else going on. And he hits the ball really well with his left foot, and that's about it. And I think Borussia Dortmund did well by offloading him to us for around 20 million, I think, as well. And up front, you've got two players that 6-7 years ago you would have been surprised to see him in here, but there we go. That's the case of buying players on a reputation. You've got Benteke, who's still at Palace, and Walcott, who's still at Everton. So that wage bill there, just from those 11 players, is well over £1 million a week. And I don't think many of us would take that as a starting 11. So, sorry, Chris, I did move away slightly from just transfers, but I was inspired by bad value in the Premier League.
So how many of these players do you think are affected by the systems they've come into versus the systems they were in the past?
That's a great question. I think Benteke is probably really the only one that I would look at right there and say, oh, maybe it's the system, because he was so effective with direct football. And I haven't seen a great deal of Palace this season, but having had a pretty disappointing start to his spell at Palace and a disappointing spell overall at Liverpool, I don't think clubs are going to base themselves around the way that Benteke would be favoured to play. And the rest of those players there, I just think are players that have fallen away for one reason or another. And I think you have to be so careful when you bring players in on big wages, and do they still have something left to prove? I think you could have said the likes of Yarmolenko, Wilshere, Walcott, when those players were brought in by their clubs, did they still have a point to prove? Were they still hungry to play? And I know it sounds a little bit cliche, but there seems to be a sort of recurring theme with players who maybe had one or two very good seasons when they're younger and have just petered out and are sitting on huge contracts now.
Sam, I'm going to put you on the spot. You're a player. What do you, when you hear stuff like that, what's your take?
Yeah, it's tough because obviously these guys are all great players in their own right. You look at players like Wilshere, Drinkwater has a Premier League winners medal, Walcott, Benteke, all of their different times have had amazing contributions in the Premier League. So they obviously have the ability. I think, yeah, you mentioned systems in terms of tactics, but also just environments, I think, are huge. I don't know, like obviously Danny Drinkwater was part of a really successful Leicester team, which obviously they talked a lot about the strong team culture that they developed there. So I think it can be difficult to transition into a new club, and if you don't settle in early and kind of get those minutes under your belt, it can be a difficult adjustment. So yeah, it's hard to say, often hard to pinpoint where things go wrong, but yeah, definitely a team that's not performing at their best at this point in time.
Would any of you take any of those players? And I'm not saying if you're thinking about this like Harshal as a Man United fan, I'm just talking if you were a Premier League team, how many of those players would you take in your starting 11 right now, ignoring wage?
I think you
argue. I mean, I can't really think of anyone. The one player I might argue a bit of a case for is Max Meyer, because he was rated extremely highly when he came over from Schalke. I think he came over on a free transfer. His deal at Schalke expired and he came to Palace, and it was a coup by Palace, right? That they picked up someone who was. I don't remember whether he's actually played for Germany, but I know he's been in and around the national team about 3 or 4 years ago for Germany, which should tell you again that he is extremely talented, because Germany itself has so many good young players that the fact that he was around that squad means that he did have a lot of talent. But I think he just hasn't, and to go back to the earlier point about tactics and systems, I don't think that the way Palace play fits him at all. I think he's used to a more expansive style of play. He is a playmaker, and Palace, I mean, just do not have that style of play in them. It's just about trying to protect their own goal and trying to nick a goal on the counter through Wilfried Zaha. I mean, as I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Palace, but that's basically what their game plan has been. So I can see why he struggled, and I personally think that he still might have something to offer for other clubs if they can pick him up.
Chris, would you not take Kepa top? Like, let's say, I personally think, I know he had a bad season, but I still believe that Kepa is good enough from what I've seen before this year to bounce back from this. And maybe there was things going on off the pitch. There's certainly suggestions that there were. Would you have him at, let's say, a top 10 club? I mean, maybe you don't agree that he should be Chelsea's number one, but surely he's good enough to be a Premier League starter.
Yeah, I think my general take is similar to Sam's. I think a lot of it, good fit with the system and the player, good fit with the coaches and the player, and then just general locker room mojo, irrespective of the off stuff. So I look at things less in a linear fashion when it comes to this, and more just, it's like throwing stuff in a pot. You just don't know where it's going to go. And someone that's played extraordinarily well in one place, for some reason the mojo's not right. I think Pulisic is a perfect example of that. Injury, you throw in the injury piece as well, and we don't. And hopefully he gets enough of an opportunity to show, because at times he was really striking. As far as Kepa goes, I'm staying along the Chelsea mode. I believe Kepa was rushed a bit too much, right? I think he's in his early 20s. I think what he did with one of the games with Saudi is absolutely unforgivable. You do not openly defy a coach, particularly on international television. But, I think hopefully he's going to round out. The confidence is going to bounce back. confidence is such a large determinant when it comes to coaching. And I would argue for many of these players here, I wonder where their levels of confidence are.
I'll say this. I do think, before any Liverpool fans have a go at me, I do think Lovren's definitely good enough to still be a starter at Premier League level without question. But if we jump back to the finance side, I don't know whether it would make sense financially for a lot of teams to take on the same deal that he's on at Liverpool. I also think Kolasinac is good enough to be playing Premier League football, but again, on that sort of wage. And you spoke about Maya as well, Harshaw, and I think that's the risk when you take players on free transfers. You're not paying those big transfer fees, so the agents know that you can afford a little bit more on wage.
Yeah. I think that's...
as a Liverpool fan, I'm sorry, Chris.
Go ahead,
I think Lovren's a really interesting one. I think he's one that could potentially benefit from a move away from Anfield, because he has made some high-profile mistakes in the past, and I think that does really affect his confidence. But I agree with you, David. I think there's a good player in there, and I think possibly a change of environment, whether that is still in the Premier League in England or overseas, could see him kind of come into his own again and have a really good season or two.
Super. Well, let's go ahead and switch gears to the strength of schedule. Starting to take a look up at the Champions League level, looking at 3 spots, I think it's fair to say that Liverpool has got the Champions League locked down. I think ManCity, without an absolute miracle, I imagine they're going to spend at least a year away from the Champions League. So if we take a look at those that have the easiest schedule as well as those that have the hardest schedule. So right now we've got Leicester at 8 points above the cut, Chelsea 3, ManU at 0, Wolves at -2, Sheffield at -2, Tottenham at -4, and Arsenal at -5, barely hanging on there. So I think the key takeaway is the folks that have it the easiest. First of all, I think Leicester with 8 points, being 8 points ahead and have only 9 games to play. I like their chances very much. They are going to have to play Chelsea and ManU, which are going to be real challenges. But I think the folks that are going to have the easiest is going to be ManU. In terms of top 5 teams, they play Leicester in the last week of the season. They do have Tottenham and Sheffield up front, but otherwise their schedule is mid to lower table teams. So I think ManU may be a big beneficiary of a easier schedule on the run-in. The Wolves, who are 2 points below the cut, have a pretty easy schedule except for Chelsea in that last week, and they're the 9th game that they have left. They do have Arsenal and Sheffield United in the middle there, but one really likes their chances a lot. I worry quite a bit about Chelsea because they're going to have to deal with not only Leicester, but the 1-2 punch of ManCity and Liverpool. The other folks that I think have it pretty tough, I want to believe in the Sheffield dream, but they're going to have to play ManU, Chelsea, and Leicester, in addition to Tottenham and the Wolves. So they've probably got the toughest remaining fixture list, closely matched by Arsenal, which are going to have to hit Leicester, Liverpool, and ManCity again, along with the Wolves and Tottenham. Anybody have any thoughts on the final 3 spots here?
I think when you're looking at fixtures right to the end of the season, we look at league position for who are the hardest teams to play against. But what I've found in recent years is you really want to be playing the teams that have nothing to play for as it comes to the end of the season. So if you can have a run-in that avoids playing as many of the people that need to get wins at, say, the Champions League or for Europa League football, or teams that need to win to avoid the relegation zone. So immediately you're looking at the teams that are like Burnley, Palace, Newcastle, Southampton, Everton, who are kind of close enough to no man's land in the league. I think once Liverpool have won the title, you're going to see them playing a lot of younger players as well. So, for example, Chelsea on the penultimate game of the season where they're playing Liverpool, I would imagine Liverpool will definitely have the title wrapped up by then. So that'd be a difficult game. You would much rather be playing Liverpool when they don't have to win than when they do have to win. So I think when you look at these fixtures, you need to look at who are playing the teams that might not have something to play for when they have to play them.
Mm-hmm. Harshel, do you have any thoughts on this?
I completely agree with David that it is a benefit. I mean, as long as you can play those teams, as many of those teams which don't have a lot to play for, there's a better chance for you to win. So, and also the fact that in this season now, I mean, whatever the mini season that we have now with 9 or 10 games for every team, there's not going to be any fans in the stadium as well. So a lot of the home advantage that you would normally associate with teams is not going to be there, because a majority of it is the fans in the stadium. I mean, yes.
Have you purposely spelt Tottenham?
Oh, I just noticed that as well.
Thanks for pointing that out globally, David. Appreciate that. So spelling wasn't my strongest suit.
I thought it was a joke.
All right, let's move along to the next chart. Thank you. Let's move to the strength of schedule for the relegation. So the very short of it is that the teams in order are Southampton, 7 points above the cut, Brighton 2, West Ham and Watford are at even 0-0, along with Bournemouth, and then Aston Villa at -2 and Norwich at -6. So Southampton seems to be blessed in that they're 7 points above the cut, and they seem to have the easiest schedule. They do have the two ManCity and ManU, and Arsenal and Sheffield, but compared to the other folks, they're in a very good position. As far as the team that has it the hardest is the team right underneath them in terms of points, which is Brighton. They have Leicester, ManU, Liverpool, ManCity, and as well as Arsenal. So they have a real murderer's row that they have to get through. So those are going to be some very interesting pieces. I think my takeaway is each one of these teams are going to have 3 or 4 difficult matches. So what's going to happen in those remaining matches are going to determine their relegation fate. Any thoughts on that, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be fascinating watching the relegation battle. I think it's almost more interesting now the Premier League is essentially being wrapped up by Liverpool. It's going to be really interesting to watch how it develops. Obviously, there's a lot of teams in there that are kind of scrapping for their lives, and we all know the value of staying in the Premier League. So I think it's really hard to predict. Like you said, there's kind of a similar strength of schedule for a lot of these teams coming to the end of the season. So yeah, it's one of those ones that it's tough to predict. It's crazy things happen in these relegation battles and towards the end of the season. So yeah, looking forward to following it.
As a common professional courtesy, I will ask David about the relegation battle with his West Ham team in there.
Yeah, I think we'll be all right, but perhaps I'm just being optimistic. I think if you look at both Brighton and Norwich, not Brighton, Norwich. If you just look at Brighton to begin with, they've got to play obviously Arsenal, Leicester, Liverpool, United, City, and I think that just puts a huge amount of pressure on the Norwich, Burnley, Newcastle, and Southampton games. So I think they're going to struggle, and Villa is the other one as well. I mean, looking at that run in, they've got to play Chelsea, Wolves, Liverpool, United, and Arsenal still, and of course they've got to play against West Ham on the last game of the season, which I'd imagine will probably be a must-win game for both teams, but it is at West Ham.
Harshel, any final notes?
Just that, as you mentioned, the fact that most of these teams do have some of the big teams to play, so it will be important that they pick up points against the teams the other teams that they're playing, and also the fact that a lot of them are playing each other in the run-in. So there are quite a few sort of relegation 6-pointers that are going to happen. So as David said, on the last day of the season, Villa play West Ham, which could end up deciding which one goes down. But even otherwise, Norwich still have to play Brighton, Watford, and West Ham. So if they can get, say, 5 or 7 points from those games, they're automatically denying their direct competitors those points as well. So I think all of the teams at the bottom which have games against each other, those games are actually going to be very, very pivotal.
Super. Well, let's turn our attention to the PreCog and have a look at what previews are coming on. So let's start with the game that everyone is highly anticipating. Two well-known coaches and former players, high stakes and drama. We are talking about the Aston Villa and Sheffield United game. Or wait. We're talking about the other game first. The Luke, I am your father match of ManCity versus Arsenal. Jedi Master Pep and Jedi Disciple Mikel. What mind tricks will be used to fix the faulty back lines? Luis or Laporte? David, can you walk us through this galactic battle?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be an interesting one. I think you're going to see Arsenal probably go with their 4-2-3-1. I think you're going to continue to see Ozil play behind Lacazette with Pepe and Aubameyang either side of them. And I think, again, you'll see Ceballos and Xhaka in behind them too. I wonder, though, I do wonder if Arteta will potentially use this break as a chance to sort of bring in a couple of, not necessarily new faces, but bring in some players to the team that are going to be there next season. Those players that I've mentioned there are big question marks as to who will be there next season. And again, when you talk about at the back, David Luiz isn't going to be there. I would suggest that he'll probably play Pablo Mari and David Luiz, but I don't know what Rob Holding's been doing. I know that he had injury. He always seems to have injury problems, but I don't know how his sort of break has gone and whether Arsenal fans would be keen to see him come and play Mari. I think Mari will be there, whatever. But, I mean, City beat them 3-0 last time in the league and dominated possession, and Arsenal just aren't as good without possession. They've only had 8 league games this season where they've had less than 50% possession, and they've only won 1 of those 8 games. And even then, they had 49.76% possession, so barely under 50%. I would expect City to dominate possession, and I think it'll be a routine win for City. I would imagine they're going to go with 4-3-3. I'm excited to see whether Foden gets a bit more game time going in towards the final stretch. I would imagine Walker will be dropped to the bench following his antics. I can't imagine Pep was too thrilled with that. Before the break, Mahrez was having a good run. I think you could see him and Sterling either side of Aguero, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised to see Gabriel Jesus anywhere in that front three, to be honest with you. But yeah, I think it'll be a comfortable win for City, and I'm going to go 3-0.
Sam, what's your take?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. It's hard to predict these things coming out of such a long break, but I think I have to agree with David. I think ManCity will be too good at the end of the day. I think Arteta is still kind of finding his feet and trying to get his philosophy across to the Arsenal players. And they've still kind of got that defensive instability that they've struggled with. Yeah, I think that ManCity are going to be too good at the end of the day, and we'll have a comfortable win as well.
You got a score line are you a 3-0 score line as well, or what do you?
I'll go 2-0.
2-0. Super. Well, why don't we go ahead and preview our next match, which actually will have some consequences in terms of Champions League and relegation spots. Sheffield United versus Aston Villa. Y'all know I have a soft spot for a coach named Dean Smith who manages a team playing in Carolina blue. But in this case, there is no Michael Jordan. I'm talking about the Dean Smith of Aston Villa playing against the likely manager of the year, Chris Wilder. Harshal, can you talk about the matchup and the consequences?
Yeah, definitely. So this is the big game that's kicking off the sort of mini season that we're going to have on Thursday night. And I think obviously both teams need a win to keep their respective, to keep on track to get their respective ambitions, which is Villa obviously want to stay in the Premier League, and Sheffield United have had a dream run and they could potentially get into the Champions League spots. So in terms of tactics and formation, I think Sheffield United are going to line up as they have throughout the season with their back three. They have agreed a deal with Manchester United to keep Dean Henderson at the club till the end of this season. So Henderson's going to be between the sticks. You're going to have Jack O'Connell, John Egan, Chris Basham as the back three, George Baldock and Ender Stevens as the wing backs. The only question would be in midfield, where They bought Sanderberg in the January transfer window, and he has played a bit instead of John Lundstrom. So that is the only sort of question mark, because Oliver Norwood and John Fleck will probably play the other two roles, and then you've got your two strikers up front who could be any of Callum Robinson, Ollie McBurney, or I'm tending to forget the other strikers they have on the books, but basically they're going to have those. Yeah, Les Mousset. So any of those, two of those three. So tactically, I think, again, this break would have done them a bit of good in terms of sort of being able to go away and get away from the hype around them in a way, but also for Chris Wilder to sort of reinforce the patterns of play that we've seen with Sheffield United. So expect them to be well drilled, expect them to keep it tight at the back. And in terms of Villa, they will have one very key player back. So John McGinn is back from injury, and I'm not sure if he will start the game, but he is going to have some involvement. Dean Smith has said that he will be involved. So that straight away then raises the question of whether Dean Smith will still continue to play Jack Grealish out on the left, or will he put him in a central position, either if, say, Villa play a 4-1-4-1, will he play as one of the central midfielders, or they could even line up in a 4-4-1-1 as they did in the Carabao Cup final against City, where Grealish played behind the striker. So it will be interesting to see how Dean Smith uses Grealish now that McGinn is back in midfield. But in terms of the other two, so they don't have Tom Heaton back, they don't have Samatta back. So it will be. I don't see this being a high-scoring game, I don't really know if it will be an exciting game, but obviously it is a game which has consequences at both ends of the table. And personally, I think it will be a 1-1 draw. I think both teams will score and will probably cancel each other out a little bit because it's the first game back. You can expect to see some fatigue come in as well around the hour mark and all of that. So probably going to be a 1-1 draw, according to me.
David? I'll jump in on that just quickly. I think that Villa, obviously we know Villa have got real defensive issues, and Sheffield United create good chances. They do. I mean, they create the best expected goals per shot in the league. And having watched Sheffield play a fair few times this season, they are really hard to break down, particularly if they go ahead. And they are just constantly fighting. I think Villa are going to really struggle against Sheffield United. I think it's a bad matchup for Villa. I think it'll be a comfortable win for Sheffield United.
Well, now we'll talk about the Merseyside derby, which will have plenty of
Chris, hold on, yeah. Merseyside.
Merseyside. Forgive my southern accent. The Merseyside derby, which will have plenty of fight, despite being in the shadow of Liverpool's massive lead in the Premier League. Will Ancelotti be able to out-tactic the big red machine? Sam, what do you expect, and how could an upset happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a very different Merseyside derby. Obviously, the derby game used to the passion of the fans, but that's not going to be the case now with COVID. I think the start of the game is going to be really important. Obviously, it's unfortunate for Everton they don't have that home support or that tight kind of Goodison Park and have the fans on top of them to help them really create an atmosphere. But I think it's also significant for Liverpool because they play with such a high-intensity style of play. So how are they going to create that atmosphere and intensity for themselves? It's interesting to see how the teams start the game and who kind of gets on the front foot, but also it'll be interesting to see how the teams end the game, because I think coming off this break, teams have managed to have friendly games, but they haven't had any competitive fixtures for a long time. So fitness could come into effect, and the substitutes could play an important role. I know Klopp has spoken really highly about players like Keita and Minamino, who haven't played as much as big roles this season. They've supposedly been looking really good in training, and we're at the forefront of a 6-0 win against Blackburn Rovers recently in a friendly game. So, yeah, I think it'll be really interesting to look at kind of both bookends of the game, and I think those could be important factors. In terms of key matchups, I think that the Everton looking likely to line up in a 4-4-2 as they have done this season. I think that's kind of something that's a little uncommon these days. Most teams play with one striker, so having Donovan Calvert-Lewin and Richarlison up there will be a bit of a challenge for the Liverpool back four. So that'll be interesting to watch and see how they handle that. I think a little injury cloud is hanging over Andy Robertson at the moment. He didn't feature in that friendly win over Blackburn. And I think that's one area of Liverpool's squad where they don't have a significant depth in terms of a backup left back. So they'll be really hoping they can get him in the lineup. If he's not in the lineup, I think that's a potential area for Everton to exploit. But if Liverpool have their first choice starting 11 out in the field, I really don't see a way that Everton are going to win. Maybe that's me being a little bit biased, but I think most people would tend to agree with me on that one. So I'm going for a 2-0 Liverpool win, and can't wait to see the boys back in action.
David, any counter thoughts?
I think set pieces, crosses are going to be a big thing. Both Liverpool and Everton combined have 26 headed goals this season. So I think that'll be important. I think that they're both in the top 5 in the top 5 European leagues, I'm pretty sure, for headed goals. So we could well see a set piece making a difference. I think it's going to be actually a bit more of a tighter game. Just to jump on what Sam was really saying, yeah, I mean, the 4-4-2 definitely has gone out of fashion, but I think it's come back in a big way this season, particularly in Spain. A lot of teams are playing the 4-4-2, and it's a great formation to press out of, to sit in a tight defensive shape. And I think that you're seeing teams, particularly in La Liga, the likes of Eibar, Granada, Getafe, who are less talented than some of the teams technically, level the field with their systems. And I think Everton will look to do the same in this game. When they last played Liverpool in the league, they played a 5-4-1 to begin with, and they conceded 3 goals really quickly. And they changed it to the 4-4-2, which they've used pretty frequently throughout the season, and actually did a lot better. I think they ended that game with, I could be wrong, I think they might have ended that game with a higher expected goals, which is crazy because I don't remember what the scoreline was, but it wasn't complimentary to Everton. I think you're going to see him sit in and concede possession purposefully against Liverpool and try and catch them on the counter. So I still think Liverpool will win, but I think it'll be close. I'll go 2-1, and I think Everton will score a set piece.
Super. Well, let's turn our attention to 2 teams who are punching in almost the same weight with Champions League implications. Both now healthy ManU and Tottenham, Kane versus Rashford, hopefully with some sun shining. Harshel, how do you see this one playing out?
I think this has the potential to be one of the best sort of games since football restarts. It's on the Friday night, so I mean, technically it will be the second game back, but even when you look at the entire fixture list over the weekend as well. United, as I said earlier in the segment about Pogba and Fernandes, I think they should start with a diamond also because Spurs will probably have problems in central areas in terms of defending that sort of half space and defending the space between the centre-backs and the central midfielders, because Mourinho is most likely going to go with, based on friendlies that have been played by Spurs in the last week, the most likely midfield pairing he's going to go, or if he goes with a midfield 3, it's going to be Ndombele, Winks, and Musa Sissoko, none of them are sort of renowned for their positional sense or their defensive ability. So if United do play a diamond, I think there'll be a lot of opportunity for Pogba and Fernandes to get into those sort of pockets of space in front of Spurs' defensive line and be able to create chances for the strikers. And again, that would also give United the chance to play with 2 strikers up front. So whether that's Rashford and Martial, or Martial and Dan James, or any 2 of those 3, that would, again, with their pace, that would cause Spurs significant problems. So other than that, I think United are going to have their first choice back 4 with Wan-Bissaka, Lindelof, Maguire and Shaw, De Gea in goal. It's just about the way the midfield sets up. With regard to Spurs, they're going to have Son and Kane back to full fitness and most likely going to start, which is going to be a huge boost. So there is a lot of potential for them to be able to pull off a result in this game, because Steven Bergwijn, who was also injured, who was signed earlier this season, is also fit. So I can see them getting something from this game, but it depends on how they do defensively, because going forward, if they play with a 4-3-3 and they have Kane, Son and Bergwijn, that is quite ineffective, and it can be quite a dangerous trio. So it depends on how they deal with United's threat defensively if United do play that diamond. Again, I'm probably going to hedge my bets a little bit and go for a 1-1, but I think United might just be able to nick a 2-1, But if you had to ask me to bet on it, I'd probably say 1-0.
Sam, what's your take on the game?
Yeah, I think it's a great matchup, actually. Two teams who have got some really great players, and it's going to be interesting to see how it unfolds. Obviously, Mourinho against his old club. I think, Tottenham will probably kind of continue to take a more defensive approach, and it'll be up to Man United to break them down. I guess Man United fans are still excited about that Pogba-Fernandes combination and really see whether they have the ability to kind of break down a deeper block that Mourinho likes to go with. So we'll see how that goes. And I think it'll got potential to be, like Ashil said, one of the most exciting games when we're getting started back up.
What's the scoreline?
I'm going to go 2-1 Tottenham just to play devil's advocate, yeah.
Super. Well, good. Well, let's preview another one of those big impact matches on Champions League and relegation spots. Will the Wolves feast on West Ham? David, walk us through this match.
Yeah, I think Wolves are going to be a difficult matchup for West Ham just because of their formation. I think West Ham. I'll explain West Ham first and then we can explain why Wolves are going to probably beat us. But what we've seen from West Ham so far this season is Seb Haddo has been left isolated a lot of the time, and Moyes has recently moved Antonio to play alongside him, and Haddo's looked better when he has someone alongside him, surprisingly, because, and I say surprisingly entirely sarcastically, by the way, because that's what Haddo played with Frankfurt. That's why we signed Haddo, but he played really well with Jovic and Ante Rebic just behind him, and we've left Haddo by himself this season, and funny enough, it hasn't worked. So they played Antonio with him. That's not a long-term fix, but I think it'll be enough to get us through to the end of the season. I don't know what's going on with Albion Ajeti, who we signed in the summer from Basel, I want to say. I think it was from Basel. Yeah. And he's hardly featured at all, to be honest with you. I mean, he hasn't looked great. And we spent 20 million on him, which is good money for West Ham. So we'll probably play with some variety of 4-4-2, I would imagine. And then the thing is, well, first of all, our defensive record is really poor, and I think that when you've got someone like Raul Jimenez and you've got players like Helmutinho, Ruben Neves, who are both really good ball progressors, then that's an issue. And I think they obviously play the back three, and I can't be the only West Ham fan that's felt that we've been far too easy to penetrate from central areas this season. When you have that back three, the wide centre backs are able to hit the central passage a lot easier, because they're sort of operating in wider areas or even in the half spaces. And those angles are perfect for playing balls to cut through a midfield straight into the centre forwards. So I think you're going to see Wolves look to play up from the back three. I think they're going to beat our press. I think West Ham are going to struggle with just... I can see them blowing through us through the centre of the pitch. And I just don't particularly trust our defence either. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there, but I'm not very confident. I think Wolves will win comfortably. I think it'll be 2-0 win for Wolves.
Harshal, do you have anything else to add?
I mean, as much as I'd like West Ham to win for David, but I think I'd have to agree with that, because also the fact that they play a 4-4-2 and the fact that the midfield duo is Declan Rice and Mark Noble at most times, I mean, I don't think that's the most mobile midfield in any case. And I think you need a mobile midfield duo when you're playing a 4-4-2 and you just have the two midfielders in there. Especially as David said, when you've got the likes of Moutinho and Neves up in front of you. And to be honest, I'm not really convinced with Rice as a midfielder either. I think he looks like what he is, which is that he is a converted centre back playing in midfield rather than a natural in the position. I don't think he's good enough on the ball, definitely, and I can see David shaking his head there. But at least, especially if I don't think West Ham have the midfield, if nothing else, to be able to cope with Wolves.
David, would you like to have a final word on this? And
yeah, I can disagree with the Rice point more. I think Declan Rice is an outstanding defensive midfielder. The stats back that up as well. He wins a huge amount of defensive duels, and he's involved in a lot as well.
But I don't think he has a passing range, David. When he does get the ball back,
he needs to evolve is the passing range. But the same time, I don't have him down as a deep line playmaker. He's a ball-winning midfielder, and he will certainly improve in that game. But he's not the sort of player that's going to hang back and hit those long diagonal passes to switch play. But I wouldn't want him to. He wins the ball and he recycles it well. He's a phenomenal tackler, and tackling is something that I'm not actually overly fussed about. I think that it's a dying art, and for a reason within the game. But he reads the game beautifully, and the issue is a lot of people have made their mind up on him from watching him play for England, and he's had some bad games for England. But I've watched him every week for West Ham since he's come into the team, and he is without question a top 4, top 5 player. And listen, if you want us to keep him for an extra year, I will happily take him. But I've got a very strong feeling he's going to leave this summer, and I don't think it will be a cheap transfer either.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, what my point was basically that's basically what I meant when I said that he looks like a converted centre back, in the sense that he's brilliant at the defensive side of things, but the passing is obviously not there. But when you have Noble as well, who again, it's basically that I don't think West Ham have enough creativity in the midfield when they do have the ball.
Would you say players like Wilfred Ndidi then are good players that are passers of the ball?
I think Ndidi is helped by the fact that he has the likes of Tielemans and Madison to give the ball.
I'd hate to see Rice leave, but I think he would slot in perfectly next to Jorginho at Chelsea, particularly if Kante is to leave this summer.
Yeah, so it does come down to the system in which he plays, I guess, and the players he has around him.
Sam, do you have an opinion on this as a current defender?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rice, obviously, his strengths are his defensive instincts and the way that he tackles and breaks up the play. So, yeah, I think it would be unfair to say that he's not a good midfielder. I think he is a certain type of midfielder in terms of, like David said, he breaks up play. He's a defensive midfielder. So I think he's still super young as well. So he's definitely going to have time to develop his range of passing and maybe become a more complete player. But I think he needs to be asked to do what he's good at, and that's going to be where he's at his best, is when he has probably someone next to him or a little further in front of him who can kind of be a little more creative, and he can focus on doing the dirty side of the game.
Super. Well, that wraps up our pod. Let's get ready to watch some football. We'd like to thank Total Football Analysis, the world's largest open source soccer analyst community. Please visit www.totalfootballanalysis.com. Join us on our next Football Thinking Fans podcast. For now, bella ciao, ciao, ciao.